On a winter night in 1942, a family of 5 walked into St. Gabriel's Church for evening mass. They never came out. No bodies, no ransom, not even footprints in the snow. Only an unlocked confessional and a sermon left unfinished. 83 years later, the discovery of a sealed basement wall rewrites everything the town believed about faith, forgiveness, and the limits of devotion. If mysteries like this keep you up at night, subscribe and follow the investigation. Winter, 1942. Hollows Gate, Maine. Snow fell in slow, deliberate flakes, each one catching the lantern light like ash. The Halloways, Thomas, Evelyn, and their 3 children, walked the narrow path toward St. Gabriel's, their boots sinking into drifts that muffled every sound. The war had made candles scarce, yet the church glowed that night, all its windows burning gold against the black pine forest. Inside, the choir had already gone home. Father Dunleavy waited near the altar, vestments folded, hands clasped tight enough to blanch the knuckles. When the family entered, he forced a smile. "You came, even with the storm." Thomas removed his hat. "Couldn't miss the Christmas novena, Father. The children need light these days." The priest's gaze lingered on the youngest girl, Marjorie, 8, who carried a worn blue hymnal pressed to her chest. "Light," he murmured, as if testing the word. Mass began with the usual solemnity, the clink of the censer, the Latin responses echoing faintly in the rafters. But something off-tempo hid beneath the ritual, a hesitation in Dunleavy's voice when he recited Gloria in Excelsis Deo, as if another tongue wanted to break through by 8 p.m. Wind battered the stained glass hard enough to make the saints shudder. The eldest boy, Paul, swore he heard knocking below the floorboards, 3 slow beats that kept time with the gusts. His mother hushed him, whispering prayers. At 8:17, the church bell rang once. At 8:18, every candle went out. Neighbors later said they saw the doors open and close without a soul passing through. When the constable arrived before dawn, the pews were empty, the confessional curtain drawn, and a single set of footprints. Father Dunleavy's. Leading from the altar to the cellar door, the Halloways were never seen again. Present day, 2025. Boston University. Dr. Lila Moran had studied disappearances long enough to know that absence behaves like sound. It echoes on her computer screen. A digitized police report from 1942 flickered under the heading St. Gabriel's Incident. The language was brittle, typed on wartime carbon paper. No evidence of foul play, recommend closure. But at the bottom, someone, likely the constable, had written in pencil, "They heard singing in the cellar." Lila leaned back, rubbing her eyes. Her students believed she chose cold cases for academic distance. But truthfully, she was drawn to silence the way divers are drawn to depth. Her grandmother had been a Halloway. A knock on her office door. Professor Daniel Cruz, archivist and occasional co-conspirator, entered with a cardboard box. "You'll want this. Diocese inventory transfer, unlabeled, restricted until last week." Inside lay a stack of photographs, each marked Property of St. Gabriel's Parish. 1942. The first showed the nave, pews intact, a faint white stain on the floor where the Halloways had knelt. The second, Lila froze, captured a wall mural half covered in plaster beneath the cracks, faint letters curved like a chant. Lux per carnem abiit. Light has departed through flesh. "Was this ever reported?" she asked. Cruz shook his head. The church sealed the cellar after the war, never reopened. That night, Lila couldn't sleep. Snow rattled against her apartment window like fingernails. She played the archival audio Father Dunleavy had recorded weeks before the disappearance, his sermon salvaged from acetate reels. The hiss of old tape filled the room. Then his voice, calm, devout, until the last minute when a whisper bled through the static. Confessio completa non finita est. The confession is complete, but not finished. She replayed it 3 times. On the 4th, she heard something beneath the words, children humming. Morning came gray and airless. Lila packed her recorder, camera, and a printed map of Hollow's Gate. The town was 6 hours north, near the New Hampshire line, barely a cluster of streets on any GPS by dusk. She stood before the church that had outlived its congregation. St. Gabriel's slouched against the hillside, its steeple blackened by lightning, its door chained, snow whispered down in endless veils. She pressed her ear to the door. From deep inside, faint as a heartbeat, came a single metallic clang. 3 beats, then silence. Her recorder captured it. The sound of a bell no one had rung in 83 years. Snow deepened through the night, swallowing the graveyard in white silence. When dawn broke, Lila parked her rental beside the overgrown rectory. The last priest had died in 1967, the diocese record said. Since then, the parish had been under perpetual maintenance, a phrase meaning neglect made holy by paperwork. She stepped out into the cold. Breath rose like smoke. The church door's chain was stiff with rust, its padlock fused. Her crowbar, borrowed from the university's field kit, slipped once before the lock gave with a sigh that sounded almost human. Inside, air moved sluggishly, trapped decades too long. Dust swirled in her flashlight beam like drowned moths. The pews were intact. A child's mitten lay on the center aisle, preserved by cold and time. She turned on her recorder. Field note, January 18, 2025. St. Gabriel's Church, Hollow's Gate. Structure sound, signs of occupation, none. Her voice sounded small against the vaulted hush. The altar cloth had rotted to threads. Behind it, a trap door was half hidden under warped floorboards. Its edges showed scratches, as if something, or someone, had tried to claw it open. The hinges squealed. A breath of cold rose from below, carrying the faint scent of wet stone and iron. She aimed her light down the narrow steps, brick walls slick with condensation. A chain hung from the ceiling, ending in a small brass bell. She descended carefully, each step groaning. The cellar wasn't as large as she'd imagined. Just a single vaulted chamber, maybe 15 feet square. Shelves lined the walls, empty but for a rusted chalice and a glass bottle labeled Aqua Benedicta, 1941. Then her light caught something new, faint shapes painted on the floor. Circles within circles, their edges crusted with salt. In the center, 5 handprints pressed into the dust, small, perfect. Arranged in a semicircle. Children, she whispered. A sound answered, so soft she thought it was imagination at first. A sigh or a phrase exhaled between syllables, lumina nobis, light, unto us. Her pulse quickened. She swung her flashlight toward the noise. Nothing but stone. She pulled her camera from her satchel, snapped photos, then crouched to examine the wall where moisture had bubbled the plaster beneath the flaking white paint. Something darker bled through. A fresco, perhaps. She scraped gently. The outline of a face emerged, eyes upturned, mouth open in a silent hymn. A sound behind her, a bell, a single hesitant chime. Lila froze. The brass bell she'd seen earlier now swayed slowly. Though no air moved, her recorder still ran. Note, audible bell tone without external cause. 10:47 a.m. The chain stilled. Silence returned. Except for another noise, faint but distinct. Seeping through the wall opposite the altar foundations, a hollow thud, then a crackle like stone giving way. She pressed her ear to the plaster. Beneath it came a faint hum. Mechanical or human, she couldn't tell. She stepped back and shone her light higher. In the upper corner of the wall, a thin line of mortar had split. Something metallic glinted behind it. She marked the spot on her phone map. The foundation's coordinates matched nothing on the church's blueprints. There was an extra chamber, sealed off completely. As she climbed back into daylight, snow had stopped falling. The air felt strangely thin, emptied. She locked the door again out of habit, though she doubted it mattered at the inn. The clerk, an elderly woman with eyes clouded by cataracts, looked up from her ledger as Lila entered. "You came from the church," she said, not asking. Lila nodded. "I'm a historian. Research." The woman's hand paused on the key rack. "People don't research that place. They leave it alone." "Why?" "Because the Halloways weren't the first to vanish. They were just the only ones anyone wrote about." Later, in her room, Lila played back the audio from the cellar. At first, only static. Then the faint bell again, 3 slow tolls, and underneath, a child's whisper almost lost in the hiss. "Confessio completa non finita est." She sat very still. That same Latin phrase had haunted Father Dunleavy's last recording. Outside, wind rose like a breath through the pines. The inn's radiator clicked rhythmically, echoing the bell's pattern. Before she slept, she checked the photographs on her camera. The last one, the fresco's face, looked different now. Where the mouth had been open, it was closed. And beneath it, a new word had appeared, faint as frost on glass. Wait. Morning light came late to Hollow's gate. Frost filmed the window panes, and the inn's radiator clanged like an old heartbeat. Lila woke with the camera still in her lap, her laptop open to the image of the fresco. She told herself it must have been a trick of exposure. Contrast shift, light refraction. But the word wait remained etched on the stone like breath turned permanent. Her phone vibrated. A message from Daniel Cruz. "You're trending on one of the academic forums. Someone leaked your field permit. Diocese might intervene. Be careful, Lila." She stared at the message, the unease of surveillance creeping up her spine. Be careful wasn't an academic warning anymore. After breakfast, black coffee, cold toast, she drove to the old rectory. A man in a maintenance jacket was unlocking the side gate. His name patch read Howard, the town's caretaker, one of the few paid by the diocese to maintain heritage properties. He squinted at her ID badge. "Boston University? You folks still digging into that old ghost story?" "I'm cataloging parish records," she said, half-truth. "Do any still exist?" Howard snorted. "If they do, they're in the crypt. Not the church crypt, the old rectory basement." Father Dunleavy was a hoarder. Kept ledgers for every sermon, every offering plate. "Maybe your answers are down there." He led her through a narrow corridor that smelled of mildew and beeswax. The air grew colder the deeper they went. The door at the end was locked with a key he produced from his coat. "Watch your step," he warned. "Floors soft from flooding last spring." The basement was lined with filing cabinets. Metal warped with rust-dust motes hung thick, visible in the flashlight beam. Lila coughed, covering her mouth with her sleeve. Howard handed her a box of latex gloves. "Knock yourself out. I'll be upstairs if you need a medic." She smiled faintly. "You mean if I faint?" "Same difference." When he left, silence thickened again. She opened the first cabinet. Birth records, donations, receipts. Then a separate ledger bound in red leather caught her eye. On its spine, embossed faintly in gold, St. Gabriel's Parish Expenditures, 1941 to 42. The first half was routine. Tithes, repairs, candle orders. But as she flipped toward December 1942, the ink changed color, from black to dark brown, as if written in haste or with a different hand. A new column appeared. Private allocations, sanctum restoration. Beneath it, a single line item. 5 souls received under 5th illumination, awaiting ascension. Lila felt the air contract. Her breath misted even though the basement wasn't that cold. She flipped the page. More entries, each stranger than the last 2 lambs consecrated. Third, incomplete. Chambers sealed by order divine. Confession suspended until light returns. The handwriting itself seemed to deteriorate. Letters looping erratically. Ink blotted as though the writer's hand trembled. Then, tucked between the pages, she found a photograph. It showed Father Dunleavy standing before the altar. Eyes closed, one hand raised in blessing. Behind him, 5 small silhouettes knelt at the communion rail. The Holloway children, unmistakably. But their faces had been scratched out. Lila sat down hard on the step, ledger open on her lap. Her heart raced. "What did you do, Father?" she whispered. A creak overhead interrupted her. Footsteps pacing slowly. She assumed Howard had returned. "I'm fine," she called, voice unsteady. No answer. The pacing stopped. She climbed the stairs quickly, pushing the door open to daylight. The hallway was empty. The front door stood ajar, wind slipping through the crack. Outside, the caretaker's truck was gone. Back in her car, she texted Cruz a photo of the ledger entry. Seconds later, he replied, "That phrasing, 5 souls received. I've seen it before. Check Vatican Archives, Ritualum Obscura, 1939 draft. It was language for containment rites, not salvation." Her pulse stuttered. Containment rites. As she drove toward the local library, the snow began again, fine needles swirling in the wind. Hollow's Gate had only one librarian, a man named Owen, his posture folded by decades of quiet. He remembered her grandmother's name instantly. "You're an Albright, aren't you?" he asked. "Thomas Halloway's daughter married into that line your people left right after the war. Never came back. I'm researching their disappearance." He looked over his glasses. "You mean the vanishing?" The difference in his tone made her pause. "Isn't that the same thing?" He shook his head slowly. "A disappearance leaves tracks. A vanishing leaves faith." From behind the counter, he pulled a binder of microfilm. There was an article, 1948, Boston Courier, written by a priest defrocked for heresy, claimed the church performed purification rituals here, called it the 5th Illumination. Lila stared at the headline. "The Mass that Swallowed the Living." Her fingers trembled slightly. "Do you have the text?" He smiled without warmth. "In theory. But the reel jammed years ago. Some stories aren't meant to unspool." That night, back at the inn, Lila spread her findings across the bed. Ledger, photograph, notes. Snow pressed against the windows, muffling the world. When she turned off the light, the faint click of a chain echoed from the ceiling. 3 measured beats, like a bell asking permission to ring. The snow didn't stop. It only changed its rhythm, falling softer, as if trying not to be heard. By dawn, the roads of Hollow's Gate were erased. Lila's car was a white mound beneath the drift. She didn't mind. The isolation felt almost designed, like the town itself had decided to keep her. She set up her field recorder on the desk by the window, its red light blinking patiently. January 19th, 2025. Hollow's Gate. Main objective. Document the origin of the phrase, 5th Illumination. Source. Suppressed article. Boston Courier, 1948. Her laptop screen flickered, the cursor pulsing as if breathing. The library had loaned her a scanned fragment of the microfilm. Most of the text was warped or burned, but one paragraph remained clear enough to read. It was said that in certain parishes, priests fearing the approach of darkness invoked the 5th Illumination, an inverted mass where the light of the faithful is taken from their bodies and offered not to God, but to the void they believed he'd left behind. She exhaled slowly. The phrase matched the tone of Dunleavy's sermons, the ones that bled into whispers of light through flesh. A knock startled her. The innkeeper, the elderly woman, stood in the doorway holding a folded envelope. "This came for you," she said, voice nearly lost beneath the wind. "No return address." The paper was brittle, yellowed at the edges. Inside, a single page written in fountain ink. You look for light in the wrong direction. It's beneath the altar. They never left the church. They were preserved. No signature. Lila stared at it until the letters blurred. Preserved didn't mean buried. It meant kept. She packed her equipment and returned to St. Gabriel's. The storm had softened to a mist, the air thick with that quiet that comes before revelation or ruin. The church's door creaked open under her hand. The smell of wax and cold stone welcomed her back. Her flashlight beam landed on the altar. She moved aside the rotted cloth, searching for signs of tampering. At first, nothing but mildew and cracked wood. Then her fingers found a seam, too clean, too recent. She pried gently. The top lifted with a sigh of released air. Inside, instead of relics or communion vessels, she found a stack of small glass jars filled with clear fluid. Each contained something suspended within, a fragment of cloth, a curl of hair, a sliver of bone. She counted 5. A chill crawled up her spine. Her recorder clicked on. 5 jars located beneath the altar, possible human remains. Preservation fluid appears synthetic. She took photos, hands shaking slightly. The last jar was different. Its liquid darker, almost amber. Something shimmered at the bottom, a folded paper sealed in wax. She lifted it carefully with tweezers, set it under the light. The wax bore an imprint, the same inverted cross she'd seen faintly in the fresco. The paper inside unfurled slowly, edges sticking, Latin lines scrawled in haste. Lux per carnem abiit, custodi lumen donic radiat. Light has departed through flesh. Guard the light until it returns. Behind her, something shifted. The faint brush of cloth she turned. No one. But the air moved, as though the church itself had taken a breath. A whisper bloomed in the dark. 5 souls received. She dropped the jar. It didn't shatter. It rolled gently to a stop, as if cushioned by unseen hands. The whisper came again, clearer now, layered voices, children, overlapping prayers. She backed away, pulse hammering. "Who's there?" Silence returned, deep enough to ring in her ears. When she stepped outside, the storm had stopped entirely. The world looked frozen in mid-breath, every branch still, every flake suspended. Back at the inn, she played the recording. For 30 seconds, only static. Then, beneath her own voice, a second sound emerged, metal scraping against stone, followed by a faint, rhythmic tapping. 3 beats, a pause, then 2 Morse code. She pulled up a translator. The pattern repeated, SAVE. Her stomach tightened. Someone or something was trying to communicate. She opened her laptop to review her field photos. In one frame, taken of the jars beneath the altar, a reflection appeared in the glass. A face, not hers male, middle-aged, eyes closed, lips moving in prayer. Father Dunleavy. The timestamp read 10:47 a.m., the exact minute she'd entered the church. Her hands trembled. She shut the laptop, heartbeat pounding. Outside, the church bell rang once, then twice, then stopped, mid-swing. The wind resumed, carrying the sound away like a secret retold. Lila didn't sleep that night. The word save pulsed in her mind with every heartbeat. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw those jars, the cloudy fluid, the faint shimmer of hair drifting like weeds in water. By morning, she had convinced herself that what she'd witnessed had an explanation: chemical preservation, an overzealous priest, wartime superstition. But even rationalizations need air, and Hollow's Gate offered none. She drove to the town clerk's office, a squat brick building that still smelled of coal dust. The clerk on duty, a middle-aged man with careful manners, perked up when she mentioned St. Gabriel's. "You're the researcher," he said. "The diocese called about you." Lila's pulse skipped. What did they say? He looked uncomfortable. Just asked if you were alone. She changed the subject quickly. I'm looking for any building permits or property modifications filed around 1941 to 43, especially for the church. He shuffled through metal drawers until he found a brittle folder. Here, 2 entries, one for roof repairs and one… He frowned, reading, Subterranean vault construction. Approved December 41. Contractor signature redacted by ecclesiastical privilege. Vault? He nodded. Means there's another level under that cellar of yours. A second chamber. Her throat tightened. Back at the church, the air inside was colder than before, as though the building remembered her intrusion. The shattered wax seal still lay on the altar. She pocketed it carefully, an artifact that now felt more like evidence. She retraced her steps to the cellar. The air grew dense, metallic. Dust drifted upward as she moved, disturbed after decades of stillness. Behind the salt-stained circle on the floor, she noticed a small grate she hadn't seen before, half hidden under debris. When she knelt to clear it, a current of cold air brushed her face, carrying a faint sweetness, like candle wax in decay. She pried the grate loose and shone her light down. Below lay a narrow tunnel, brick-lined, descending at an angle steep enough to make her stomach lurch. She hesitated. Logic screamed caution. Instinct whispered go. Her recorder clicked on. Secondary structure discovered. Possible expansion of original crypt entering at 1312. She descended, boots scraping metal rungs. The tunnel twisted, then widened into a chamber so dark her flashlight seemed swallowed. The walls were lined with wooden panels carved with names, dozens, perhaps hundreds. Some were familiar, parishioners from the old registers. Each panel bore a small indentation, circular, the size of a coin. At the center of the room stood a stone table draped in decayed linen. Upon it rested a single jar, identical to the ones beneath the altar. Only this one was empty. When she leaned closer, she saw writing scratched into the stone beneath it. Preserve what faith cannot hold. A sound echoed above. Footsteps again, this time heavier. She called out, "Hello?" No answer. The air shifted. A faint flicker of light at the tunnel mouth. Someone else had entered. She turned off her flashlight and waited. The shape that descended was human, carrying a lantern. As it neared, the light revealed a man in a long wool coat, silver hair. Eyes too calm for the moment. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "Neither should you." He smiled faintly. "I was here before you were born." Her heart kicked. "Who are you?" "Caretaker," he said, "of the faith that remains." He walked toward the table, setting the lantern beside the empty jar. "Father Dunleavy tried to save them. The war took more than lives. It took belief. He thought if he could hold the light inside them, faith would survive the century." Lila's voice came out hoarse. "He preserved them? He preserved hope." The man ran a finger over the carved names. They were willing. Most of them. The Halloways. He stopped, eyes clouding. The ritual required innocence. He mistook purity for youth. She swallowed hard. "Where are they now?" The caretaker looked at her as though the answer were obvious. "Everywhere you've stepped since you arrived. This place hums because they hum beneath it." A faint vibration underfoot proved him right. The low, resonant hum she'd mistaken for wind earlier. "Why tell me this?" she asked. "Because you've heard them. Once you hear, you carry the cord. The diocese calls it contagion of faith. I call it memory." He lifted the empty jar, turning it in the lantern light. One space left. They always leave one. Her stomach clenched. For what? For the one who completes the confession. He set the jar down gently and began to walk back up the tunnel. "Wait!" she called. "Who are you really?" He paused at the ladder, glancing over his shoulder. "The last parishioner." Then he was gone. When she emerged minutes later, daylight was already fading. The door stood open, snow swirling in. The church smelled faintly of burning incense. She checked her recorder. The audio ended the moment the man had appeared. No voice, no footsteps. Just a deep, steady hum that lasted 7 minutes. Her phone vibrated. Another message from Cruz. "Lila, stop whatever you're doing." The diocese pulled the archive access. "Someone's coming for the materials." She looked toward the altar. The 5 jars were gone. Only the 6th, the empty one, remained. By the time Lila reached her motel, night had settled into a heavy blue hush. The snow outside pressed against the windows like breath. She sat on the edge of the bed, the recorder still in her hand, listening again to that endless hum. There was a pattern beneath it. Too structured to be random, too measured to be wind. 5 notes, then silence, then 5 again. Her fingers shook as she transcribed the timing on the notepad. 5 short, 5 long. Morse code. The letters spelled OPEN. She closed the recorder fast, as if it might bite. The bathroom mirror caught her reflection, drawn, pale, the ghost of her composure eroding by the hour, the caretaker's words replayed. 1 space left, the one who completes the confession. Was that what the hum wanted? For her to open something? Sleep came late, restless, filled with half-formed dreams of faces behind glass. When she woke, her phone buzzed with another message from Cruz. "Cruz, diocese sent an agent. Said they're reclaiming church property. Don't go back there." Cruz, "Also, the name you asked for, the caretaker, only one record fits. Raymond K. Alcott, died in 1963. Lila stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Died in 1963. She'd spoken to a ghost, or to someone pretending to be one. Either way, she needed proof. By noon, she was back at St. Gabriel's. The door had been bolted, but fresh tire tracks cut through the snow. Inside, the air carried that same chemical sweetness. Footprints, large, booted, tracked toward the cellar. She followed them down. The room was altered, every surface scrubbed clean, the salt circle washed away, the shelf empty. The single remaining jar was gone. On the altar lay a folded piece of parchment sealed in red wax. Her name was written across it in looping black ink. Dr. Lila Monroe. Her throat tightened as she peeled back the wax. Inside, a single line of text. Preservation requires witness. Below it, a small brass key tied with linen string. Her hands trembled as she pocketed both. A movement caught her eye, the faintest shimmer along the far wall like heat mirage. When she approached, the stonework blurred into transparency. She pressed her hand to it, and the surface gave way with a sigh, revealing a narrow door of iron lattice. She used the key. The latch turned. The hidden corridor beyond descended deeper than before, its walls lined with candle sconces long extinguished. She lit one with her lighter, shadows leapt forward like startled birds. Halfway down, the corridor widened into a vault. It was cleaner than the crypt she'd found earlier, almost immaculate, as if tended recently. Along one side, wooden drawers stood stacked to the ceiling. Each bore a brass plate engraved with a date. 1942, 1943, then a long gap and one more, 2025, her own year. The drawer handle gleamed, untouched by dust. Against reason, she pulled it open. Inside lay a glass jar, empty except for a folded photograph. She lifted it carefully. The image was grainy, decades old. A family of 4 standing on the church steps. The caption scrawled in fading ink. The Callahan family, Christmas Eve, 1942. Lila's breath hitched the missing family, the one whose case had started everything. Beneath the photo lay a brittle paper tag labeled Specimen 6. She whispered, "6th jar." A faint sound came from behind her. the soft chime of glass clinking. When she turned, the candles she hadn't lit were burning on their own. The drawers vibrated, lids rattling in sequence like an unseen hand tapping each one awake. She stumbled backward. The hum returned, louder now, layered with something else. Voices, whispering, praying, pleading. She dropped to her knees, clutching the recorder. Audio note. The vault is responding. I don't know to what. Her words fractured under the noise. She thought she heard her own name threaded through it, faint but deliberate. Then, silence. Every candle went out at once. She groped for the lighter. When the flame caught, she froze. The jar she'd opened no longer stood empty. It was half filled with dark water. Floating inside was a small crucifix carved from bone. Her skin crawled. "Specimen 6, she whispered again. Me." The realization struck sharp. Someone was documenting the present, adding her to the pattern. Footsteps echoed from the tunnel. Not the caretaker's light tread, heavier, authoritative. She pressed herself into the shadows. A man appeared, his silhouette haloed by a flashlight beam. His voice carried the smooth authority of someone used to command Dr. Monroe. He said, as if greeting a student who disobeyed, "You've gone too far. Who are you?" "Father Duval," he replied, stepping closer. His clerical collar gleamed faintly. "I oversee the archives you've been trespassing in." "The caretaker, he told me." He smiled, gentle but cold. "Raymond Alcott was buried 60 years ago. Whatever you met wasn't him." "Then who was it?" Duval regarded the glowing jar. "The church keeps many memories. Some refuse to stay confined." He moved toward the shelves, touching each drawer like a pianist caressing keys. "These are not crimes, Dr. Monroe. They are acts of faith misunderstood by time. Faith doesn't preserve children in jars. Faith preserves what flesh forgets." He stopped at the open drawer, looking down at the jar labeled Specimen 6. "It seems the pattern continues." "I'm not part of this," she said. "Oh, you already are," he replied softly. "You've opened what the war began. The church will need you to close it." He turned toward the tunnel. "Leave, Dr. Monroe. Take your notes, your recorder, all of it. The vault will seal itself soon." "And if I don't?" "Then you'll join them." His voice echoed as he disappeared into the dark. She stared after him, pulse hammering. The candle flames guttered, their smoke curling into shapes almost human. She ran. By the time she reached the surface, the church doors had shut themselves. A deep grinding echoed below, stone shifting against stone, sealing whatever lay beneath. Outside, snow fell again, thick and silent. Lila stood in the drifts, gasping for breath, the photograph still clutched in her fist. The family's faces blurred beneath melting snowflakes, but their eyes, even through the fading image, seemed to look straight at her. The drive back to Hollow's Gate took less than 15 minutes, but the clock on Lila's dashboard said an hour had passed. The roads were slick with sleet, and the radio flickered between dead static and faint organ hymns. She pulled into the motel lot, headlights washing over a second car parked beside hers, an unmarked black sedan, engine still warm. Someone had arrived while she was gone. Inside her room, the air was disturbed. Her notes, once scattered across the desk, were now neatly stacked. The recorder sat in the center, the red light blinking. It had been turned on in her absence. She pressed play. At first, only silence. Then, faint breathing after a pause, a man's voice. Father Duval's. "You have something that belongs to us, Dr. Monroe. The archive was not built to contain sin, only to remember it, return what you took, or memory will find you first." The tape clicked off. Lila backed against the wall, breath sharp. He'd been here. He knew everything she'd seen, and yet The threat sounded less like menace and more like prophecy. Her reflection in the window looked fractured by frost. She thought again of the jars, the way each face had seemed suspended between prayer and drowning. When morning came, she drove to the town's historical society, where Cruz was waiting. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his coat streaked with salt from the roads. "You look like hell," he said. "Then we match," she replied. They sat among shelves of brittle newspapers. Cruz slid a folder toward her. "I dug through microfilm. The Callahan disappearance, that family from your photo, wasn't the only one. 4 others between 1941 and 43. All reported within a 20-mile radius. All last seen after confession at St. Gabriel's." Lila flipped through the reports. Names, ages, grainy photographs. Whole families gone. The articles were clinical, detached, missing persons, presumed wartime relocation, no investigation, no follow-up. "The war was an easy excuse," Cruz said. "Everyone assumed they moved east, joined relatives, whatever. But I found something else." He placed a second document on the table. A hand-drawn map of Hollow's Gate. Ink faded but legible. The church sat at the center. From it, 5 lines extended outward like spokes. "Each line ends at a river crossing," Cruz said, "and at each crossing, someone disappeared." Lila's chest tightened. 5 disappearances, 5 jars. He nodded. And maybe a 6th coming. The idea hung between them. She reached into her coat pocket and placed the folded parchment Duval had left her on the table. "Preservation requires witness," Cruz read aloud. "Sounds like a creed." "Or an instruction," she said quietly. Cruz leaned back. "Lila, you need to walk away. You've done the research. Publish, expose, whatever, don't go back in there." "They're not finished," she said. "Something's still happening underground. He said the vault would seal itself, but that sound—" "What sound?" She opened the recorder and played the hum she'd captured earlier. Cruz frowned. "That's not random," he said. "I've heard that pattern before. It's a subharmonic frequency, low enough to cause disorientation. Some old churches used resonant stone designs to mimic that effect. They thought it made prayer more divine." "So the sound isn't supernatural?" "Not by itself, but if someone's controlling it." He trailed off. "Father Duval," she finished. That evening, Lila drove alone to the northern bridge, the first endpoint on Cruz's map. The river below ran high, swollen with meltwater. The air smelled of iron and wet soil. She stood at the railing, staring at the current. A memory surfaced. Her grandmother's voice from childhood, reciting a prayer she'd never understood. "The river remembers what the earth denies." The hum began again, not from her recorder this time, but from the air itself. The bridge vibrated beneath her feet. She leaned over the rail. Beneath the surface, something glimmered, a faint shape moving against the current. For a moment, it looked like fabric, pale and waving. Then it sank. Her phone rang, startling her. Cruz's voice came through, urgent. "Lila, get away from the river now." "Why?" "Because Duval's dead." She froze. "What are you talking about?" "They found him this morning in the rectory. Throat cut, and get this, his blood filled one of those jars. The police think it's suicide, but—" Lila looked back at the water. The current churned violently, as if stirred from below. "I don't think he killed himself," she whispered. The line crackled. "Then who—" A sudden sound drowned him out. Not static, but a low bell tolling from somewhere deep beneath the river. Lila dropped the phone. The bridge shuddered, rivets groaning. She stumbled backward as cracks raced along the asphalt. A section of the railing tore free, crashing into the current below. The bell tolled again, louder, closer. Then silence. The river smoothed, as though nothing had happened. Lila retrieved her phone. The call had ended, time-stamped 1 minute past midnight. The screen flashed with a new text. Unknown number. Return to the vault. Bring the witness. She stared at it until the chills sank deep into her bones. The next morning she found Cruz waiting outside her motel. He'd packed 2 cameras, a flashlight, and a revolver. I figured you wouldn't listen, he said. You figured right. They drove through the slush toward St. Gabriel's, the rising sun burning through the fog like a wound. From the ridge above, the church looked smaller, humbled by the land, but smoke curled faintly from its chimney, as if it were alive again. Cruz parked on the frozen grass. If someone's still down there, then we finally ask why, she said. The front doors opened before they touched them. The air that spilled out was warm, almost welcoming. Together they stepped inside. The nave glowed with candlelight. At the far end, the altar was restored. The jars returned, all 6 of them, filled and sealed. In the flickering light, the faces inside the glass appeared serene, almost holy. Cruz whispered, "Oh God." Lila moved closer. Her reflection merged with theirs, and just for an instant, in the shimmer of the glass, she saw the Callahans, and behind them, herself. The nave smelled of resin and candle smoke. Wax dripped in slow rivulets down brass holders, collecting like amber at the base. The 6 jars gleamed beneath the altar, refracting the flickering light until it looked like the entire floor shimmered. Lila's pulse thudded in her ears. She turned to Cruz. "Record everything." He raised his camera, lens trembling slightly. "You think they'll stop us?" "I think they've been waiting." As they stepped closer, a sound bloomed, soft at first, then swelling like a choir tuning itself. The hum she'd heard before was now layered with faint words. Latin, interwoven with something else. English fragments of confession. "Forgive me, Father. It wasn't meant." "I saw the light." Cruz adjusted his recorder. Multiple voices, overlapping frequencies. She crouched near the jars inside the first. The liquid was clear as glass. A woman's face floated just beneath the surface, serene, eyes closed, lips parted in prayer. The second jar held a child's hand pressed to the glass as though reaching out. "Jesus," Cruz whispered. "Not him," Lila murmured. "Someone else." The hum deepened. The 6th jar, the newest, vibrated against the altar stone, a faint ring spreading outward. Then, without warning, the church doors slammed shut. Wind roared through the rafters. Candles flared higher, their flames bending toward the altar as though pulled by a breath. Cruz grabbed her arm. "We need to get out." "Wait." Her gaze fixed on the jars. The liquid inside was rising, boiling without heat, bubbles tracing shapes that almost resembled words. One of them surfaced briefly, clear and unmistakable. "Witness." Cruz's camera light flickered. "Lila, look." In the reflection of his lens, the air behind them shifted. Figures materializing in the aisles, half shadow, half light. Parishioners in 1940s dress, faces luminous with devotion, their mouths moving silently. "Are you seeing this?" he whispered. She nodded slowly. "They're reenacting it, the last Mass." At the altar's far side, a priest appeared, robes pristine, head bowed, Father Dunleavy. His movements deliberate, slow, as he raised an invisible chalice. The congregation knelt in unison. Lila felt her knees weaken, as though gravity itself demanded reverence. Cruz gripped her shoulder. "Don't kneel." The air vibrated harder, the hum turning into a sustained chord that rattled the windows. Dust cascaded from the ceiling beams, the jars glowed from within, pale, phosphorescent, heart-like pulses. The priest's eyes lifted. For the first time, he saw her. Not through reflection, not as memory, but as though he recognized her. "Dr. Monroe," he said softly. His voice was clear, alive. Cruz dropped the camera. That can't be real. Dunleavy smiled faintly. You came to finish what I began. Lila's voice shook. What did you do to them? I preserved belief. The war had hollowed the town. Faith was rotting. I took the light from their flesh and gave it to the altar. You murdered them. He shook his head. No, I removed the dying part. You think flesh holds faith, but it decays. Only memory endures. Cruz pulled Lila back, whispering, We're hallucinating some kind of infrasound effect. Dunleavy's eyes turned toward him. Skepticism is a cage. The candles blew out all at once. Darkness engulfed them. Thick, physical. In that darkness, Lila heard breathing. Hundreds of shallow, synchronous breaths. Then, faintly, the sound of dripping water. A single candle relit itself. In its glow, Lila saw that the jars were no longer sealed. The wax had melted away. Inside each, the liquid was draining, seeping through cracks in the stone floor. The ground trembled. The hum rose into a keening wail. Cruz stumbled backward, covering his ears. It's too loud! Lila knelt by the sixth jar, hand trembling. Inside, a face was forming, her own. Eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. No, she whispered. No, that's not. The apparition of Dunleavy moved closer, his voice almost tender. Every witness becomes what they see. She looked up at him, defiant. Then let me see the truth. He hesitated, then reached out a hand. Come then. When their fingers touched, a shock passed through her, a flood of memories not her own. She saw the church in 1942, filled with voices and light. The Halloways kneeling at the rail, the priest weeping as he raised the host. She felt the ground open beneath them, not as pit, but as radiance. Faith condensed into light too bright for flesh, the vision shattered. She gasped, falling backward onto cold stone. Cruz hauled her up. What happened? They didn't die, she said breathlessly. They became the ritual. He turned them into the foundation. The hum began to fade, replaced by distant bells. 6 tolls. The figures in the pews dissolved like smoke. Dunleavy last among them, his final whisper threading through the air. Guard the light until it returns. Then silence. The candles guttered. The jars went dark. Cruz turned slowly to her. What now? Lila steadied herself. Now we find out who's still guarding it. Outside, dawn broke pale and uncertain. The church behind them exhaled a last plume of smoke from its chimney, as though satisfied. As they drove away, Lila glanced in the side mirror through the misted glass. The church windows reflected the rising sun in perfect symmetry, 6 points of light burning like eyes. The drive back to Boston should have felt like an escape, but it didn't. The road unrolled through fog like a strip of film, each mile flickering between memory and hallucination. Lila's hands trembled on the steering wheel. Cruz sat beside her, silent, staring out the window at nothing. The recorder lay between them, its light off for the first time. Neither dared switch it on. By late afternoon they reached the city. The sun was a dull red disk above the skyline, the air thick with exhaust and winter salt. They parked in the underground lot of the anthropology department, where the hum of fluorescent lights replaced the silence of the church inside her office. The familiar smell of paper and coffee should have been grounding. Instead, it felt sterile. Wrong. Her walls, once lined with maps and research photos, now seemed bare, as though something had erased the past week from her surroundings. Cruz dropped into a chair. You realize what we've got? Evidence of mass psychosis, ritual homicide, institutional cover-up, she said. And no proof anyone ever existed. He nodded grimly. The recordings alone are enough to make people listen. But when she connected the recorder to her laptop, every file showed a corrupted timestamp. 00:00:00. The screen flickered. Audio ghosts. Static, snippets of Latin, faint cries, bled through the speakers. Then a voice, unmistakable, her own, whispering, "Guard the light until it returns." Cruz recoiled. "You didn't say that." "No," she said softly. "Not out loud." He rubbed his face, exhausted. "Lila, maybe this isn't about proving anything. Maybe it's about stopping it." She leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "How do you stop faith?" That night she dreamed of the jars again, 6 of them, floating in darkness, their light pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. When she woke, the clock read 3:33 a.m. The hum had returned, faint but present, vibrating through the floor of her apartment. She followed the sound to her study. The recorder lay on the desk, still disconnected, yet its red light was glowing. Her laptop screen turned on by itself. A new file had appeared. Keeper.move. She hesitated, then opened it. The video showed a single static shot, the interior of St. Gabriel's, filmed from the choir loft. Time-stamped 1 hour ago. Someone was there, a figure in robes, head bowed, moving between the altar and the jars. The resolution was grainy, but the posture was familiar. Father Duval, except he was dead. The figure turned toward the camera. Its face was a blur of shifting light, features rearranging as though trying on different visages. For an instant, it looked like her. Cruz called an hour later, voice hoarse. "You need to see this." She met him at the lab. He'd run spectral analysis on the corrupted audio. "The hum isn't just sound," he said. "It's modulated light frequency, recorded resonance. Every jar, every chamber was built to store it." "Store light?" "Store consciousness," he corrected quietly. "Sound is memory." He looked at her, eyes wide. "Lila, the ritual wasn't about preserving bodies. It was about recording souls." The words settled heavy in the air. She whispered, "Then who's the keeper?" He hesitated. "Maybe whoever carries the last sound." Before she could respond, the lights flickered. Every monitor in the lab blinked to the same image, 6 circles of white light pulsing in unison. Then text scrolled beneath them, in that same looping, elegant script she'd seen in the altar's carvings. "Lux per carnem abiit. Light has departed through flesh." Cruz yanked the power cable. The screens went black. "It's spreading through the network." Lila stared at the dark monitors. "It's not data, it's the pattern." They stood in silence, the hum deepening around them. Somewhere, far below the concrete, something metallic rang. A single chime, faint but certain, "The bell," Cruz whispered. Lila's phone buzzed. Unknown number again. One text. "Return to the river before dawn. Bring the light." She looked at Cruz. "They're pulling us back." "Then we don't go." But she was already moving toward the door. "Lila, stop," he called. She turned, eyes distant. "I think I already went." Outside, the city had gone eerily quiet. Snow falling without sound. Streetlights flickered in slow rhythm, 5 short, 5 long Morse, again. OPEN. When she looked back toward the skyline, she saw it. 6 beams of faint white rising through the mist, aligning perfectly above the horizon like a constellation reborn. She whispered, "The vault's opening." Cruz grabbed her arm. "If you go back, you won't come out." She met his eyes, calm now. "Maybe that's the point. Someone has to close it from the inside." He stepped back, shaking his head. "You don't even know what it is." "Yes," she said softly. "I do. It's faith that forgot where to die." She turned toward the North Highway, where the dark shape of the river cut through the snow like a wound. And as she drove into the fog, the 6th beam flickered brighter, like a heartbeat answering her own. The road north wound through pines like a thread pulled taut. Snow fell sideways in the beam of Lila's headlights, a silver current against black. The hum was constant now, vibrating through the steering column. A low resonance that made her bones ache. Dawn pressed faintly behind the clouds. The sky was the color of lead. The horizon, a bruised violet line where land met the frozen river. She stopped at the bridge where she'd first heard the bell ice crusted the guardrails. The water beneath sluggish and dark. The current seemed slower than before, heavy with something unseen. She turned off the engine. Silence rushed in. A silence that wasn't empty but listening. From her coat pocket she took the brass key and the folded parchment. Preservation requires witness. The phrase felt less like instruction now, more like inevitability. Behind her, a pair of headlights appeared in the distance. Cruz's car. Of course he hadn't let her come alone. He pulled up beside her, window rolling down. "You couldn't wait until daylight?" "It is daylight," she said. He looked at the river. "So this is where it ends? Or starts?" They stood side by side on the bridge. The air hummed. The ice cracked faintly below, forming circular fissures that drifted outward like ripples from an unseen center. Cruz's breath fogged. "I checked the topography. There's a drainage tunnel beneath the north bank. Runs directly under St. Gabriel's foundation." Lila nodded. "The river and the church are the same system. He built them to feed each other." He frowned. "You mean Dunleavy?" She didn't answer. Her eyes had found something near the bank. 6 stone markers half buried in snow, arranged in a curve. She climbed down the embankment, boots crunching on frozen reeds. The stones were carved with names she recognized. Holloway Callahan. Dunleavy. The 6th was blank. She reached out to brush snow from its surface. Beneath her hand, letters began to appear. Not carved, but emerging, as though written from within the stone itself. Lila Monroe. She froze. Cruz's voice echoed behind her. "Lila, back away." But the ice beneath her feet groaned. Cracks shot outward in all directions. Water surged up through them, black and cold, swallowing the markers one by one. Cruz grabbed her arm, pulling her back toward the bridge. The water followed, rising unnaturally fast, churning though the air was still. From its depths came light, pale, pulsing, 6 distinct orbs swirling together into a single column that reached toward the sky. "The vault," she gasped. "It's opening." The hum crescendoed into a note so low it was felt more than heard. The river's surface split, revealing a spiral of steps carved into stone, descending into the glowing current. Cruz stared, speechless. "That wasn't there before." She turned to him. "Stay here." "The hell I will." "Daniel," she said quietly, "you're the witness now. If I don't come back, tell them the light wasn't divine. It was desperate." Before he could stop her, she stepped into the water. It burned with cold and heat at once, a sensation beyond temperature. The light wrapped around her legs, pulling her gently downward. She descended the stone steps, each one slick with algae and age. The walls glowed faintly with the same carvings she'd seen in the church, spirals of Latin and symbols of inversion. At the bottom, the tunnel widened into a chamber she'd never imagined. The river's current flowed through its center, passing under an archway carved with a single phrase, "Custodi lumen donec rediat." Guard the light until it returns. In the chamber's heart stood a pedestal of black stone. Upon it rested the 6th jar, sealed, radiant, pulsing with light so intense it seemed alive. She approached slowly. The hum resolved into whispers, her own voice layered with others. "You heard us. You opened the door. You carry the sound." Her hands trembled as she touched the jar. The surface was warm, vibrating with the rhythm of a heartbeat. "What do you want?" she whispered. "To rest." The word carried not through sound, but through her chest, resonating deep inside her. She lifted the jar. The light flared brighter, spilling over her fingers like liquid fire. Visions surged. Faces, memories not hers, moments of prayer and terror entwined. She saw Father Dunleavy sealing the vault, tears streaming down his face. Saw the caretaker carving names into the stone. Saw Duval kneeling before the river, begging forgiveness from something that could not answer. Then the light dimmed. The jar cooled. She placed it back on the pedestal. "It's done," she said softly. "You're free." But the voice replied, "Faith doesn't end. It occupies whoever opens the door." The light shot upward, filling the chamber, enveloping her. She gasped, blinded, every nerve aflame. Then, quiet. When her vision cleared, she stood alone. The jar was empty. The hum was gone. Up above, she heard Cruz shouting her name. She climbed the stairs, water streaming from her clothes. The river had calmed. The light was gone. Cruz ran to her, eyes wide. "What happened?" She looked at the surface of the water. Her reflection stared back, calm, but her eyes shimmered faintly with pale light. "It's closed," she said. He frowned. "You sure?" She smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure." Behind them, the river gave a single, distant toll. One last echo of the bell. By the time they reached Boston again, the city had thawed rain-replaced snow, running in thin rivers along the gutters. Lila watched the windshield wipers sweep rhythmically, their tempo matching the echo still faint inside her skull. The pulse of the river. The beat of the jar crews parked beside her building and cut the engine. "You need a hospital," he said quietly. "I need silence," she answered. Her voice had changed, softer, lower, as if she were still half submerged in water. They rode the elevator up in silence. The city hummed through the walls. Traffic, voices, the mechanical throb of living. It all sounded distant to her now. Inside her apartment, she dropped her soaked coat over a chair and went straight to the window. The skyline glimmered through drizzle. Neon reflected in puddles like colored glass. For a moment, the reflections trembled, forming circles, 6 halos that shimmered and vanished. Cruz poured coffee, set the cup near her hand. "If it's really over, the light, the vault, then what happens to you?" She didn't turn. "I carry the remainder." That's what they wanted. Witness becomes keeper. That's not an answer, Lila. That's theology. She faced him then. Everything about this has been theology disguised as physics. Dunleavy wasn't saving souls, he was binding resonance. The light isn't holy, it's memory, and memory doesn't disappear. It migrates. He rubbed his face. Then we destroy it. Whatever's left, we end it before anyone else touches it. She shook her head slowly. You can't destroy a frequency, it just finds another instrument. Cruz studied her eyes. The faint luminescence she'd brought back from the river was still there, flickering like candlelight behind her pupils. Lila, you're scaring me. I'm fine, she lied. I just need to document what happened before it fades. She opened her laptop. The corrupted files from Hollow's Gate had reappeared, newly dated one by one. They began to play themselves. Still images of the church, the vault, the river, all in impossible clarity. Cruz leaned closer. These weren't in the recorder. No, she said, voice distant. They're in me. The room dimmed. The screen's light brightened until it painted the walls silver. From the speakers came the hum again. Low, harmonic, comforting now. Lila, Cruz said, stepping back, turn it off. I can't, she murmured. The hum deepened. Rain streaked down the window like melted glass. The air itself seemed to vibrate. Books trembled on the shelves. Cruz reached for the laptop. Then I will. Before his hand touched it, the hum cut off. The screen went black. Silence fell so complete, it seemed to swallow the room. Lila exhaled. It's leaving. What is? The light. Something in her expression changed. A release, A soft collapse. She swayed. He caught her before she hit the floor. Her pulse fluttered, erratic. Her eyes rolled open briefly, pupils wide. "Tell them," she whispered. "Tell them it wasn't divine. Tell them it was human." Then her body went still. Cruz held her for a long moment, waiting for breath that didn't return. Outside, thunder rolled above the skyline, long and low. He looked toward the dark laptop screen. A faint reflection looked back. Not his, not hers. 6 faces, luminous, calm, their mouths moving silently as if finishing a prayer. He closed the lid. 3 days later, he stood at the edge of the Charles River, winter wind biting through his coat. In his pocket, Lila's recorder, its light now dark. He pressed play anyway. Static. Then, faintly, her voice. "The river remembers what the earth denies." He dropped the device into the water. It sank without ripple. As he turned away, church bells rang somewhere in the city. 6 slow tolls, perfectly spaced. Spring came early that year. The snow along the river melted into gray slush, carrying bits of ash and salt toward the harbor. Boston smelled of thawing earth and wet stone. Cruz returned to his work slowly. Lectures, papers, the rhythm of normal life. All of it felt borrowed, like he was acting a part he no longer believed in. The memory of Lila's last words clung to him. "Tell them it was human." One night he stayed late in the department archive, cataloging old magnetic tapes from a donation. The room was silent except for the whisper of reels turning. He almost didn't notice when the air began to vibrate. A single note rose, soft, familiar. The hum. He froze, heart hammering. The sound came from one of the unlabeled boxes. Inside lay a spool of film, brittle with age, tagged only Hollowsgate, 1942. He threaded it into the projector. The bulb flickered on, throwing light onto the wall. The footage was grainy but intact. The Halloway family walked toward St. Gabriel's, snow swirling around them. The camera panned to the open church doors, golden light spilling out. Then the image trembled, overexposed, until the screen was pure white. When it cleared, the scene had changed. The church was empty. The same angle, the same frame. Only dust and shadow remained. A voice whispered through the speaker. Lila's voice. "Every witness becomes what they see." The film burned out, leaving a circle of smoke on the wall. Cruz stepped back, shaken. On his desk, the surface gleamed faintly, reflecting 6 points of light that had no source. They hovered there for a moment, then drifted upward, dissolving into the dark. He exhaled, whispering, "Rest now." But deep in the silence, the hum persisted. Steady, eternal, like breath beneath the floorboards of the world Hollow's Gate never reopened. The church was condemned, the site fenced off and left to rot. Locals said the river shifted course that spring, swallowing the north bank entirely. Fishermen avoided the water, claiming it sang under the ice. A year later, an anonymous package arrived at the Boston University archives. Inside was a small glass jar filled with clear liquid and a folded note. The handwriting was unmistakably Lila's. Preservation complete. Faith returned to flesh guard the light no more. The jar was empty. At least that's how it appeared. Until night fell, and the archivist locking up saw something glimmer within a brief pulse, gentle as a heartbeat, fading with the dawn. The hum never returned. Only the silence remained, full, waiting, alive.